Hello everyone, this is Bobbin Threadbare, and welcome back to the Human Revolution. Don't mind the room decontamination, it's almost done. Oh, there, see? It already happened. Now, we're not quite finished with this building yet, but that there's the skywalk to the next building. See, you may have noticed there's a couple of guys up here, like so. And they're off in this couple of offices, just sort of separated out from everyone else. I think this is where, what's-his-face, the Russian guy, used to have his lab back before they killed him. I guess I walked away from a conversation. Oh well. Come on, come on.
Access grant.
I knew I could beat the time. Sevchenko. That was his name. Alright, I got into that office in the hopes that it would connect to this one. But it doesn't. At least, not to a cursory glance. And it's not like it matters anyway. Sadly, because these two are sitting down, I can't do a double takedown on them. Yeah, you saw the ventilation shaft there. So, I've got a different solution in mind here. You know, they're sitting close enough together that if I killed one, the other one would definitely notice. Even if I did a silent takedown, the other guy would notice. He was right there, you know? Kinda obvious. But yeah, grenade. Frag mine, in this case. Solves all my problems in one fell swoop. It's kind of convenient how the starting point is often a corner like that. Come on, come on.
Access granted.
And there we go. Ooh. Birth location unknown. With no N. Or with only one N instead of two. Typo. Oh, and these are the scientists who aren't Megan Reed. Yeah, Vasily Sevchenko, deceased. So his final file has been deleted, aside from that fact. Yep, sweep and clean. And I believe the implication was that he is above the ground floor in this building. That was where his office was, but you'd have a hard time proving it because they killed him and swept his room for every trace of his being and got rid of it. Just to be on the safe side, I'm assuming. Huh. Tranquilizer rifle rounds. But yeah. Whoops. Oh, Shadow of Omega. That's what I was talking about before, the Omega virus. The reason this place exists. Or at least the excuse for why this place exists. Alright. Well, I believe one of those things gave me the code for the lasers here. So yeah, I could deactivate them without doing anything. Yeah, Sevchenko could have been in one of these offices too. Haven't been in here yet either. Oh, nice. 30 seconds to beat the tracer.
Access granted.
Probably not these down here, then. Looks like these belong to scientists who aren't worthy of getting their own individual offices. And so they've got, you know, part of an office separated by partitions. And they aren't even very tall partitions either. I mean, Jensen is not that tall of a guy, and he is towering over these partition walls here. So yeah. You ever work in an office where people can easily just sort of get a little high up on their office chairs, look over the side, see what everyone else around them is doing? This is that kind of office. Whether you like it or not. They even went through the trouble of bolting the partitions down to the ground, too. Nothing behind the copier. Sad. And the poor guys in this room, they have to share their office space with the supply closet. Oh yeah, by the way, there's a few fun emails around here. Basically, there's this one guy with a giant stick up his ass who is irritated by all of the office pranks the other scientists are pulling on him, and he's got the stupidest emails about threatening his fellow scientists and asking the security guards for help. But well, you find on one of these computers that it was the security guys who have been messing with it. Like, they're the ones who put what was it? Farm animal bestiality porn as his wallpaper. That's something you always want to see as soon as you log in. Bestiality porn. Ooh. Have I been in here? I guess not. The door's closed. I mean, the computer's unlocked, but that's not uncommon in the Omega Ranch here, which is kind of funny, because this is a black site. I mean, it has pretense of being something else, and not all of the scientists realize they are working in a black site. But still, you would think that they would be better at adhering to security than they are. Alright, other building now. That was the skywalk I just crossed. And as you can see from the mini-map, there are a lot of folks around here. Not all on the same floor. Oh, this one's asleep. That'll make it easier. Angel of Death. I remember during a practice run, I took this guy out, and I think a guy upstairs heard me. Came charging down the stairs to find out what the hell was going on, so I hid the body, waited around the corner, bam, someone else heard it, came down, bam. Honestly, it was easier that way. Like, the way I gotta do it now is, They got like this separate protected network here, and even they are getting the Nigerian Prince spam email. Like, I forget if it was in the DLC or if it was somewhere else, but I believe at some point you find a computer that admits to doing this. Well, I figure, it's just sitting right next to the damn thing, it might as well. But I think you do eventually find a computer that admits to using those emails to basically to infiltrate secure networks and spy on them. That's why I said you should watch out for where they pop up. Once upon a time. And yeah, you see that big old atrium with the open floor plan? Big room surrounded by hallways on all sides? That there is what makes this building more difficult than the other one. That, and the fact that those two cameras I just shut off are not the only ones. Like you can see right there on the minimap, there's at least two more. Yeah, had some trouble here, for instance.
Ready to relieve you, Corporal.
I think he was right. Man, am I tired of this woman's nagging.
Colvin, eh? What's she whining about now?
Everything from the food to the temperature.
She's just trying to get on your nerves to see if you'll draw
Alright, you may have noticed that was a silent takedown just now. And if I had let those two finish off their conversation, one of them would start patrolling and the other one would have sat down in that chair there at the end of the hallway. Bit troubling, you know. Did I forget to look at that pocket secretary? And that was me debating whether or not to shut off that alarm panel, but, you know, I've already taken out all of the guys right here. But yeah, I took those out silently because their screams, their death screams, would have carried. And let's just say things get a lot more complicated really fast if you let that happen. And by the way, you might have noticed from the objective markers, but one of the scientists I need to meet is on this floor and behind those doors I was just looking at. And the other one is right upstairs, and in fact, that elevator there is a shortcut up to him. That's why it was concealed like that. Huh. You know, I would, but it would make too much noise. And besides, that just leads back to the hallway. But yeah, you know, it's an alternate way in case you don't have enough hacking and you don't find the little keypad. Even though getting in here is optional in itself, it's nice that there's so many ways to do it. Yep, there's the crack on the other side. Alright. Just debating where to go and how to get there. Alright, that's the door I closed because I killed the guard behind it. And I think up is my best bet for the time being. There are a couple of guards up here. And there is an entrance to a hallway outside of the atrium on the left there. That would get me past the camera and these two patrolling guards, but there is a static guard in that hallway. We'll be seeing him later, and besides, this is the Angel of Death run, I suppose? Angel of Death mission, maybe? They're all gonna die. That's my point. I'm going to kill them one by one. And if I don't kill them to knock them out, then I will kill them once they are on the ground. And as soon as that camera is out of the way and the other guard is looking the wrong way, down in one. Bring around the corner here. It had nothing on him. Alright, luckily the camera can't see me from behind the wall here. And the other guard... well, now that's going to be tricky. Because I can't let the camera see what I'm going to do to this guy. And I can't let him lie down where he's standing right now. I mean, as soon as the camera's looking the wrong way, and as soon as he's looking the wrong way, well, that's when the magic can happen. Again, still sticking with silent takedowns, because the first floor has their own group of people. And once again, dude's voice would carry. Alright. By the way, one of the reasons I'm doing Angel of Death run here is because there are some civilians mixed into the population.
Wow. I didn't think they'd let you guys out of the high security area. We'd heard that a lot of the subjects weren't doing so well. But you're looking healthy. I don't think I'd have the balls to let myself be experimented on. But we seem to have no shortage of volunteers.
He seems to understand what's going on here.
This isolation has really allowed me to concentrate. Plus the facilities are second to none.
Like,
I know it sounds strange, but I'd rather be here than back home.
or at least, they're sort of justifying what they are doing to themselves. They are justifying where they are, is what I'm saying.
I know security seems high, but they're only here for our protection. A lot of people would kill for the technology we're developing. In a way, I feel really lucky to be here. When this is all done, we'll have changed the world.
Like, they volunteered to be here. They aren't like Corbin and Megan Reed and the rest. They didn't get kidnapped to be here, but at the same time, they have come to realize on some level that what's going on here is not right, is not above the board.
Access granted.
It's not entirely legal. Now this guy, I think... the laser nodes are screwing with the cornering system here. But yeah, I think this guy's isolated enough. So... blades to the lungs. Alright, and that door leads to my second objective. Or the third one, depending on what order you go in. You can meet the scientists in any order. You'll get the exposition from the first one you meet, and you'll get the virus you need from the last one you talk to. Pretty sure. I usually don't... I didn't bother really experimenting with that. Because, you know, either way, you have to meet all three of them. You have to discuss the situation with all three of them. You have to get all of the stuff you need from all three of them. So it's not all that important which one you meet first. It just changes some of the dialogue and when you get some stuff. Alright. Camera's still functional, so I think I'll get to those guards a bit later here. Luckily it can't really see through the glass there. Alright, let's talk to the second scientist and his buddies.
You don't look like the other security people. Did they call you in to deal with the smugglers? I know they've tried to enter the ranch before. You look like you could handle all of the compound security on your own. You're probably equipped with some of the projects we're working on, right?
Well, some of the ones they're ripping off, sure.
We're working as fast as we can. This pressure you're putting on us doesn't help, you know. Just let us do our job, please. There's no need to always be looking over our shoulders and pointing guns at the backs of our heads.
See, now at least these guys have an excuse for why they would think that I am part of the facility staff here. Especially because I haven't done any alerts.
What do you want? I told you people not to barge in here. Wasn't the new biochip design enough?
Dr. Koss, I'm here to get you out.
Jensen? From Sarif? But we were told we'd been written off.
Not exactly.
Listen, Jensen. They forced me to work for them. I didn't want to create the new biochip, especially since it was based on Sarif's research, but they didn't give me a choice.
No one doubts your loyalty, Dr. Koss. Do you know what they plan to do with this new biochip?
I'm not sure. They said something about having Tai Young Medical produce it and distribute it through LIM, but I can't be sure.
I know, and I'm here to bring you all back. But to reach Megan, I need you, Colvin, and Faraday to stage lab accidents as a distraction, simultaneously.
Isn't that a little risky? Besides, how will we coordinate these accidents? It's impossible.
Maybe not. But it's that or staying here and eventually ending up like Dr. Sevchenko.
They killed him, didn't they? He kept provoking them, coming up with these wild escape plans. They try to keep us apart as much as possible now. All right, Mr. Jensen. I'm with you. What's our next move?
We need to disable their GPL tracker. I know Dr. Savchenko was working on something.
Yes, a virus program. We all thought it was too risky considering we had nowhere to go. But I don't have it. You'd better check with Nia or Declan.
Dr. Koss, the bioship you mentioned was based on Sarif's studies?
Yes, I believe so. At first I thought it was merely convergent research, but I've worked with Dr. Reed long enough to recognize her handiwork. Besides, I had been working on something similar back in Detroit.
And your knowledge of it made you invaluable here.
At least to a certain extent, it probably helped us all stay alive. But now with Dr. Shevchenko, I guess we've all become expendable. Except for Dr. Reed, I suppose.
Why do you say that?
It's more of a general feeling, I guess. Back in Detroit, we all realized that we were on the verge of something groundbreaking. And here, well, everyone seems to view her research as crucial in some way.
That might explain why she's being held in a secured area.
Possibly. I'm just glad we're going home. It's kind of hard to believe.
I haven't been able to locate Dr. Colvin yet. Any idea where she might be?
Yes, I think. For a while, Nia used to work on this floor, but she can be rather headstrong. And I think the guards were afraid she'd try to talk to me. They moved her to a more isolated lab on the second floor of the building. I'm sure it's locked, though, so you'll have to find another way in.
Sit tight, Dr. Koss. When you feel a vibration from your GPL, set off that distraction. That'll be the signal.
I will. Good luck, Mr. Jensen. And hurry.
So, yeah, here in the black site, the clues that the biochip is something other than a recall repair are a little more obvious, but at the same time, this is well past the point where you can, choose or not choose to have it installed. This is the elevator, by the way.
We're working as fast as we can.
And yeah, I've talked to those people already. Okay, so... before I head downstairs, I should take care of my loose ends up here. And I am going to go down to the basement. Well, actually the first floor. Because there are a couple of more guards down there. And once I've dealt with them, that's pretty much it for the entire compound. I've cleared out this floor, for one. And I've cleared out the outside, cleared out the other building. So, yeah, there's just that guy, that camera, and another guy who is beyond the range of my see-through walls, but not beyond the range of my vision. Oh no, you don't. You do not get to go in front of that camera. Bad enough it's looking at that other guy. Alright. This is a security computer here. And I think that was the password for it, which will make this nice and fast. Top frag. Guess he's an FPS lover? Yeah, that's both of the cameras in the atrium. The one on this floor and the one on the third floor. So, hey buddy. You were all alone, but now that doesn't matter. Interesting architecture they've got here. I suppose it's vaguely reminiscent of DNA, but there's 3 spines instead of 2. Oh. Keypad. So there's some stuff on this floor here. Stuff to look at. Most importantly, there's this one last guy here. Must be awkward to kill people with your elbows. Ooh. Too bad I don't really use those. Ah, this is the key code I got a little earlier from one of those pocket secretaries. And there's a reason to come in here, which is that vent right there. Oh, and there's another way through. In case you don't get that number and you don't have hacking, you can still get inside that room. Now over here we have some more storage areas. Looks like a bunch of those decontamination boxes. Bunch of crates you can move around, but which don't hide anything behind them. And past them we've got this storage room and a breakable wall that leads directly outside. Man, that's convenient. Alright, that does it for this floor. So there is just that one lobby area. Oh, yeah, and this. Yeah, now this little vent here isn't really all that useful. It's just lets you get past the camera, but only partly. And then the weird thing is that, yep, just making sure there's a lobby. Making sure the wait here is worth it. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the fact that that little ventilation duct I was just in had no other exits. Like, usually they try to justify these things' existence with grates and fans that block your passage except to useful areas. But not in this case. Nope. Alright. Yep, and here's the door to get in. And, you know, just to make things a little faster, I'm taking the back way in here. Alright. Now we've got to see one last doctor before we are done with this section of the map. But I'll handle that next time. So, for the book I'm covering in today's Cyberpunk Corner, I'm not quite sure if you could describe it better as cyberpunk or post-cyberpunk. But if nothing else, it is set considerably further in the future than the usual material I analyze, but there's more to the genres than just how far ahead they look. But I shouldn't drag on the introduction. Today's novel is Altered Carbon, a book published by Richard K. Morgan in 2002. About the author. Today's author's biography is another light one. Richard Morgan was born in 1965 in London, although he grew up in a rural English village. His youth was generally uneventful, and he got a degree in political history from Cambridge University. Upon graduating, his twin desires were to travel the world and write. And so he got jobs in various parts of Europe as a teacher of English as a foreign language, places like Spain and Turkey. Eventually, he returned to the UK and became a teacher trainer. For 14 years, he was an educator. Throughout this period, Morgan was also trying his hand at writing, and in 2002, he published his first novel, Altered Carbon. That same year, his book was optioned by a Hollywood producer, and although it never did become a film, it did get Morgan enough money to become a full-time writer. He also got the Philip K. Dick Award the next year, and apparently Altered Carbon could become a Netflix show soon? I guess we'll see. Anyway, Morgan has continued to write in the decade and a half since Altered Carbon came out, including sequels to Altered Carbon, a fantasy series with a gay protagonist, and video game scripts like Crysis 2 and the 2012 Syndicate remake. So that's that. Now, back to what I was saying earlier about cyberpunk versus post-cyberpunk. So you know how cyberpunk has some heavy noir and hard-boiled detective influences? The protagonist isn't some superhuman master of his craft. He isn't a morally righteous good guy. He's just a guy, or a gal, who's only barely good enough to win over the corrupt forces arrayed against him, and that's assuming he wins in the end. But at the same time, cyberpunk also has punk influences. The system is always corrupt. The people who support it are sheep. The protagonists are outsiders who, well, they aren't really trying to change the system so much as they're trying to survive going up against it and coming out the other side with their values and lives intact. That is the essence of being a punk. Post-cyberpunk is two things. Most directly, it's a reaction to cyberpunk, a partial or complete refutation of the genre's anti-establishment position. The system isn't completely corrupt, and living within its limits can have advantages as well as drawbacks. And if the system has problems or bad actors, those problems can be addressed. The system can change for the better, and you don't have to exclusively look out for number one. Do you remember Trouble and Her Friends? Because the way the protagonists grow up and become a part of the system on their own terms makes the book a kind of transitional work between cyberpunk and post-cyberpunk. But now here's the other distinguishing feature of post-cyberpunk. The worlds they describe tend to have more of a post-national and transhumanist vibe to them. The social order of today has broken down, and a new order has taken its place. Not a better society, necessarily, but one that arises out of the incredible technology that this future provides. The protagonists tend to be more normal folks than outsiders, because understanding this future society is a big part of what makes these stories fascinating. Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom is honestly more post-cyberpunk than cyberpunk because of this distinction. Altered Carbon is another mix between cyberpunk and post-cyberpunk, but it's inverted compared to Trouble and Her Friends. The protagonist is very much a punkish outsider, and the system is most definitely corrupt, but science has advanced to the point that nationality and the nature of humanity have both become very fuzzy. But I should save the analysis until after I recap the story. In the setting of Altered Carbon, the human personality has become digitized. Babies have something called a cortical stack implanted in the base of their skulls that stores all of their personality and memory information and can override the brain if need be. So the body becomes nothing more than a sleeve worn by the stack for convenience's sake. Death is less of an issue than ever before because the stack is significantly more durable than the human body, and you can always implant the stack into a new sleeve or else upload the personality into a new stack already fitted into a new sleeve. The rich can take advantage of this technology to back up their minds in remote storage facilities filled with cloned duplicates of their bodies. But even middle-class folks can afford a resleeving or two when their current selves grow old. Something else that's happened in this future is humanity has expanded beyond the solar system and has started colonizing other star systems. The colonizing ships are slower than light speed and use cryogenic storage to get colonists safely to their new planets. And the United Nations has set up the Protectorate to govern these new colonies, whether the colonists like it or not. And one of the ways that the Protectorate enforces itself on the new colonies is by sending a class of elite soldiers called envoys. See, while ships travel slower than light, information can transfer immediately, including digitized human beings. As such, envoys receive special training that lets them fight no matter what sleeve they get uploaded into, since normally there's this whole system shock thing where you have to get used to being in someone else's body. And in many cases this is literally true, since most crimes are punishable by spending decades or centuries in storage. And while you're out of the picture, someone else can buy the body you were born in and walk out in it. There are also synthetic sleeves that are grown in vats, but they are usually of poorer quality than those that grow up the old-fashioned way. Our protagonist is Takeshi Kavach, a man originally from Harlan's world, which was settled by a Japanese megacorporation and East European workers. He was an envoy once upon a time, but after a dishonorable discharge, he fell into a life of crime. Really, there was nothing else for him to do, since envoy training is so extreme that nobody trusts them to hold positions of power or even extend a line of credit. As such, he and his partner Sarah were eventually caught and sentenced to a century in storage. This century is interrupted when Kavach wakes up in an unfamiliar sleeve on Earth, San Francisco to be precise. His services were purchased by a Methuselah named Lawrence Bancroft, a rich man who has lived for centuries thanks to modern technology. To all appearances, Bancroft committed suicide, a futile action for a man who gets his personality backed up every 48 hours and has a rack of clones on standby. And this makes so little sense that Bancroft wants Kavach to pick up where the police left off and investigate his death. Kavach meets a local police lieutenant, Kristen Ortega, who seems unusually interested in him, as well as Bancroft's wife, Miriam, who is so sexy in her current sleeve, she makes Kavach hard as a rock. Kavach also hears about Resolution 653, a UN court case about bringing a dead witness to the stand by re-sleeving the cortical stack. Catholics believe that the soul passes on with the death of the body, so re-sleeving a stack or restoring from a backup are considered sacrilegious, and so members of the faith are usually kept in storage indefinitely or erased. Unfortunately, Kavach doesn't come to the obvious conclusion that Bancroft killed himself to forget about something that happened in the past 48 hours, and so instead he starts his investigation by looking through all of the death threats that a rich Methuselah like Bancroft tends to get. He also heads to an AI hotel called the Hendricks, on the recommendation of the Bancroft chauffeur. AI hotels became unpopular a few centuries back, which is unfortunate for them since hosting guests is sort of like sex for an intelligent hotel. Thus, Kavach is the only guest when he checks in, and when two people try to abduct him in the lobby, the hotel destroys them with automatic cannon fire. The two people turn out to be the same person, sleeved into two bodies thanks to an insurance scam. And when Ortega shows up, she identifies the kidnapper as Dmitry Cadman, a professional assassin. And since he showed up so fast and was after Kavach, not the previous owner of the sleeve, Kavach knows there's more to the Bancroft case than what the police believe. Kavach starts by investigating Bancroft's cloning facility, and then begins looking for death threats made for the sake of sisters and daughters, because he finds out that Bancroft likes to have sex with sleazy prostitutes who resemble his wife. After centuries of marriage, he has this weird thing where he worships her and can't have sex with her anymore, and so he has sex by proxy instead. This leads Kavach to Ember, a small town 125 miles north of San Francisco. Victor Elliott lost his wife Irene to storage when she got caught trying to steal memories from a rich person's backup transmission. And so his daughter Elizabeth went to the Bay Area and worked at a brothel to try and get the money to buy back Irene's sleeve from the rich woman who now uses it for alternate weekends. Elizabeth seemed to get blackmail material on Bancroft, but then someone tore her body apart, and Victor doesn't have the money to get her a new sleeve. It's all very sad, but it's also a dead end. Kavach goes to the whorehouse where Elizabeth worked and poses as her mother, Irene, which he can do because you can re-sleeve yourself into the opposite gender. The prostitute he talks to, Louise, believes him and promises to ask around for him, but as Kavach leaves, a big Asian guy tries to kill him. There's a chase, but it's interrupted by the police, and Ortega shows up again to basically let Kavach off with a warning. When Kavach gets back to the Hendricks, Miriam Bancroft is there waiting for him, and she has drug-fueled sex with him, while suggesting that she could do even more if he convinced Bancroft to end the investigation. Intentionally left unsatisfied, Kvatch takes his mind off things by going out and buying a change of clothes, plus a few weapons. On his way out of the gun store, Kvatch notices a tail and decides to lose him by going to the most dangerous part of town before returning to the whorehouse for more information. He expects to find Luis, but instead he gets ambushed by a bunch of gang enforcers who call him Riker. They take him north to Oakland, to a place called Way Clinic, and they use a virtual reality simulation to torture him for days, which in real life only takes a few minutes. Under torture, he admits that he isn't Elizabeth or Riker, but is an envoy, and between sessions, he manages to bluff them into thinking that the envoys will take revenge on them if they don't let him go. This is enough to convince the woman in charge, who wears a synthetic body, to let Kvatch out and bring him to a new destination. However, we don't find out where it is because Kvatch kills the woman and his other guard and talks the driver into landing. Kvatch then gets his guns and kills all the guards at the whorehouse, tracks down the clinic, and kills everyone inside, armed or not. Being an envoy, Kvatch has lost the ability to feel guilt or remorse for the people he kills. The one exception he makes is Miller, a high-ranking employee whose head he takes for later interrogation. A few hours later, Bancroft calls Kvatch over to chew him out for his actions, but Kvatch is pretty angry himself. Bancroft explains that Riker was Ortega's old partner and lover before he was sent to storage for going too far in Seattle. And Bancroft chose the sleeve mostly because he was pissed off at Ortega for not taking him seriously. This also explains why Ortega has been going easy on Kvatch and has been trying to keep him out of trouble. Now that he knows about Riker, Kvatch convinces Ortega to help him out, since it'll mean he'll leave that sleeve that much faster. The two interrogate the assassin Cadman in virtual space, but he only threatens them. So they go talk to Cadman's lawyer, threaten him, and plant a bug in his office that gets them 3 phone addresses: New York, a local fight arena, the Panama Rose, and the Bancroft residence. They investigate the Panama Rose first, and we find out that the arena uses combat synthetics to put on death matches in which no one really dies. But they don't find anything suspicious. After that, Kvatch returns to the Hendricks and hears from Ortega's co-worker that Riker might have been set up. Kvatch and Ortega chase down another false lead, but once they're done, Cadman ambushes them in a synthetic body of his own and almost blows them up. Turns out, he got free thanks to a tracer added to Kvatch's sleeve by the storage facility, and the reason his lawyer called the arena was to get Cadman a couple of combat sleeves. Kvatch does some investigating and finds out that that woman who was in charge of his abduction to Way Clinic, Trep, she was the one who arranged the tracer in his sleeve. Kvatch interrogates the man who runs the storage facility, but that's when Trep shows up in a new sleeve. She has no hard feelings about getting killed since her new self doesn't remember it, and she convinces Kvatch to go with her to Europe to talk to her boss. Trep's boss turns out to be Raylene Kawahara, a Yakuza Methuselah whom Kvatch had met before. She was the one who recommended Kvatch to Bancroft because she knew a former envoy would be convincing, and she's holding his old partner Sarah hostage so he'll tell Bancroft a lie to make him end the investigation. Incidentally, she's also working with Miriam Bancroft, although Miriam has no clue about Kawahara's true motives. With no other choices, Kvatch agrees to be Kawahara's puppet and spends some time getting high with Trep. He then talks Kawahara into freeing Irene Elliott so that she can plant an old military stack virus in a seedy virtual brothel so that Kvatch can tell Bancroft he got infected and killed himself to avoid transmitting the stack virus into his backup. However, as Kvatch arranges all of this and convinces Bancroft, he realizes that all roads lead to a high-class brothel called Head in the Clouds. He realizes that Trep must have been taking him there after Way Clinic, and that Kawahara must run the place and have something to hide. In fact, it ties into the reason Riker got set up, and Resolution 653, since Riker was investigating a dead Catholic woman who was washed ashore near where the Head in the Clouds airship makes its rounds. Kvatch interrogates the Way Clinic survivor, Miller, in virtual space, and gets information about the airship. But then Cadman shows back up, having taken Ortega as a hostage. Cadman's gone kinda nuts since Kvatch killed him 3 times, and he arranges a humiliation fight on the Panama Rose to get his revenge. Kvatch puts up a decent fight, all things considered, but he's about to die when Trep and the police show up and kill Cadman. Fortunately, all of this nonsense gives Kvatch the opportunity to double-sleeve himself with a spare combat sleeve, using Riker's sleeve to go off with Imbrium and distract Kawahara. Kvatch arranges a plan to end Kawahara once and for all. He gets Irene Elliott to infect Kawahara's backup transmission with the military virus, and implants a recording device in his eye so that he can get Kawahara to admit to everything. The footage won't be admissible as evidence in court, but he plans to release it online, and to the media instead. Kawahara plays along to buy some time, and in the process she reveals that Bancroft killed himself because he killed a prostitute. He killed a prostitute because Imbrium doped his sleeve with male hormones, and Kawahara set him up so that he could influence the UN and keep the fact that the Head in the Clouds offers snuff services a secret. But one thing leads to another, they get in a fight, and Kvatch blows up Kawahara's stack as his combat sleeve falls to his death. In the end, the UN follows up with an investigation mostly to save face. Riker is exonerated, and Kvatch gives most of his fee to the Elliots so that they can re-sleeve their daughter. He does this so that he can feel like at least one good thing came out of this whole mess. After a final farewell to Ortega, Kvatch takes a needlecast back to Harlan's world, and the book ends. The analysis. I gotta be honest with you guys. This book was not as good as I was hoping it would be. The writing tries but fails to live up to the skill of Chandler and Gibson. And there's all that serendipity about how Riker and the UN resolution, everything ties together in a neat little bow. But none of that is what really bugs me. Richard Morgan touches on a lot of interesting topics, but he doesn't really explore them as well as I think he should. For one thing, there's storage as prison time. What the hell is the point of that? While in storage, you are turned off. You don't notice any time passing, making it pointless for both purposes of imprisonment, punishment, and rehabilitation. I mean, sure, there's the shock of coming back in a different body and seeing how everything's changed in 100 years, but that's a secondary effect of imprisonment at best. The point is to keep you captive and miserable for months or years so that you'll have time to reflect on your actions and regret them. And you can't do that when you're turned off. Hell, in Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, people do the exact same thing out of boredom. No. The better high-tech solution is what they did in an episode of Deep Space Nine. Implant memories of a prison sentence into your head and then let you go free 5 minutes later. And they can do that in the Altered Carbon setting. Virtual reality can seem to run dozens of times faster than the real world. Then there's the repeat of a problem I had with Magic Kingdom: continuity of consciousness. Like I said in that analysis, if a method of restoring someone could create a duplicate if you do it wrong, then you are creating a new life, not continuing an old one. Altered Carbon explores this issue more intelligently than Magic Kingdom, what with Cadman's duplicate and a long, hard conversation that both Kvatches have with each other before and after that final mission, but it's still not explored enough. The Catholics, who make a conscientious choice not to restore from backup or re-sleeve after organic death, are treated as victims of a foolish philosophy created by a backwards religion, not as people who make a different judgment as to what counts as a continuation of life. Now, I will admit that stack implantation does fit my definition of continuity, even if it doesn't count for the altered carbon Catholics. But that brings me to another question I have that this book doesn't really address. What happens to the brain here? The cortical stack stores a copy of your memories and your personality, but there are a lot of brain functions that can still assert themselves in defiance of a stack rewrite. When Kvatch gets uploaded into Riker's body, he has to deal with a few things that Riker left behind. Riker has an addiction to cigarettes that Kvatch has to overcome. Not just a chemical dependence, but an addiction that involves the reward centers of the brain. Addiction affects your personality, but it carried through a personality rewrite. So what is up with that? Kvatch also feels an attraction to Ortega thanks to Riker's body, an attraction that is specifically missing when Kvatch copies himself into that combat sleeve. So what the hell is happening to the brain here with these cortical stacks? Altered Carbon seems to assume that conscious thought and memories somehow exist separately from your brain matter, but that is so not how it works. I mean, you could have an implant that records and duplicates your thoughts and memories, and you could have that implant wired into your spinal cord so that it can override the impulses of your brain, but what happens to the brain? It can still think, can it? It can still take in sensory information, especially since your ocular nerves, for one, do not travel up the spinal cord. So was Riker there throughout the whole book, seeing and experiencing everything Kvatch did, but unable to affect his own body? When the Riker who went to storage returns to his own body, does that mean he will be forever controlled by a version of himself who hasn't been trapped behind his own eyes? What kind of a horrible fate would that be? And if Riker isn't in there, then what the fuck has his frontal lobe been doing this whole time? Human brains work on chemical reactions and electric signals, but you cannot separate the two. Every emotion is chemically triggered, and every decision we make is predicated on emotional weights. You cannot mix and match, and if you do, you are doing something way more fucked up than killing a person so that a backup version can take his or her place. Thanks for joining me again today for Cyberpunk Corner. I hope I'll see you next time for a book about post-apocalyptic eugenics and religious extremism.